Dr. Chin, welcome to Anti-Aging Uncensored. I am so happy you're here to talk about this important topic.
Thank you so much, Jill, for having me today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks.
Oh, that's great. Well, me too. So I want you to give our listeners just a little bit of context before we start diving into CBD and what it can do for us and all the good stuff, that hopefully grab bag of stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how CBD sort of integrates into that.
So I'm a physician. I'm an integrative physician, and what I specialize in is cannabis medicine. So I help patients integrate cannabis medicine safely into their health and wellness routines. So this could be treating acute conditions, or it could be treating chronic conditions, or it could be using as a preventative.
And have you found that the opinion of this area of expertise has become a lot more widely accepted? And when did you start seeing that happen?
Oh, absolutely. So for me, I was a cannabis patient before I even became a doctor,
Oh,
before I even
wow.
became a physician. I actually was going to medical school in San Francisco shortly after they legalized it. So that's over 20 years ago. And I have an autoimmune disease, basically pain, chronic pain in my spine, and there's no cure. And I would wear this back brace all the time. And one of my attendings, one of my mentors, introduced me to medical cannabis. And when it worked, I decided to dedicate my career into finding out how this plant works, why it works, and how I can help patients integrate it safely.
I love
So
that. I love
a
that.
lot has changed.
A
A
lot
lot
has
has changed.
changed. Yeah. The parents used to like look in your room for the like pop bags and stuff. So yeah, a lot has changed. So this gets to be a gray area sometimes, but let's talk a little bit, and I'd love to hear from you when we think about CBD versus sort of cannabis and THC. Maybe you can dive into a little bit of an explanation just to sort of clear the differences up for us.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a little primer, a little 101, if you will.
Uh-huh.
The cannabis plant contains over 500 chemical compounds, okay? And many of them you will find only in trace amounts. But the two most biggest players, I would say, of the cannabinoids, right, of the cannabis compounds are THC and CBD. CBD is one of the big six cannabinoids, and you can think of CBD as an anti-inflammatory, anti-pain. It's a muscle relaxant. It helps with epilepsy. But the difference is that CBD does not get you high, and it does not make you feel any lethargy or sleepy or sedation. Now, THC is what we would see growing up on television, right?
Right.
That is sort of that party part of it.
Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
totally.
right.
The
So
stoners.
the stoner. So THC is therapeutic because I don't want to discount that, but THC gives you that euphoria, that sedation, that deep relaxation. And so patients and consumers will choose now, they get to choose strains, formulas that have more CBD so that they don't feel that euphoria and sedation, or they might need something with sedation and they'll choose formulas that have higher THC.
And so when people are like, I heard many, many years ago about cannabis treatment being used for people with cancer and who are dealing with like chronic painful treatments and things like that. Is that, so that's using sort of the psychotropic, whatever THC side of the world.
Yes. So, and then it depends on what the patient's goal is. So I treat a lot of cancer patients, probably makes up about half of my practice. But as you know, sometimes, chemo and radiation have come a long way, and many patients actually will work, while they're receiving cancer treatment. So you can take a CBD type part of the cannabis plant so that while you're working, you're decreasing nausea, you're increasing your appetite, decreasing pain, but you're not feeling high. And these are my professors, these are doctors, these are lawyers, these are moms and dads. They're taking CBD during the day while they're going through chemo, and they might take a THC cannabis at night.
Got it. So it's so funny to see the evolution also in even my personal life. My parents and all of their friends. I'm not saying it's not a stoner club or anything. I don't want to throw my mom under the bus, but like they've talked about the benefits, and they're ordering CBD to help them with chronic pain and topicals and things like that. So I just think it's so funny to hear our parents, who we used to like hide from, receive these things for stuff that's going on with them. And I just love that. I love that it's being used. So let's move on a little bit. I want to focus on women's health today, and specifically around conditions and things that happen when you're in your 40s or 50s and 60s and beyond. So, what are some of the most common uses for the use of CBD?
So for women, and I, especially during the pandemic, I've seen much more women this past year than I ever have, because for women, as taking the caregiving role, they're home, they might have children that are remote learning. They might have their parents living with them, and then they're taking care of their partners. So it's sort of that sandwich generation. And women want to use CBD for anxiety, relaxation, for insomnia. A lot of my women are using it for, especially, my perimenopausal women, menopausal women, for me especially, going to sleep, staying asleep, waking up with hot flashes, just sort of the anxiety, the heart palpitations, that the up and down, or the hormonal fluctuations that you might find during the day. CBD is a really, really great choice without the side effects of making you feel high or sedated or lose productivity.
Yeah, some of my friends, I am not quite at the menopause stage. Well, I could be for my age, but like I just haven't experienced yet. But talk about the sleepless nights being really bad, like I haven't slept in 3 weeks kind of comments. And so this is beneficial for that.
Yes. And
That's
it's
great.
a better option. I would say it's a much better and safer option long term than putting patients on Ambien, a sleep aid,
Sleep
or
meds.
Lunesta, or a benzodiazepine like a Valium or Xanax or Klonopin.
Are there any withdrawal properties around this? Like if you're consistently taking over a period of time, are there concerns about withdrawals that you might go through if you stop?
For CBD, no. For CBD, there's no withdrawals.
That's great.
I do find that a small amounts of patients will find that withdrawals from heavier THC use. And those withdrawal symptoms are usually like moodiness, they might feel a little bit more irritable, and that usually passes, goes back to baseline within a week or two.
Well, that's great. So that is sort of symptoms around menopause and things like that, and sleep. So you don't have to be going through menopause to have sleep issues. So that's really helpful. What about other issues as we get older? Pelvic floor stuff, painful issues that are going on, changes in our body with little air quotes.
Absolutely, Jill. A lot of women talk about libido, lower libido, or vaginal dryness, and sort of friability, atrophy, sensitivity with sex. They might find that increased vaginal itching. And you mentioned topicals. There's actually a lot of feminine products that are available that are cannabis based, CBD and THC. It could be CBD without THC or with it. That many women are using in their pelvic region to enhance sex, relaxation, could be pelvic floor issues.
Wow.
Changes. Yeah, there's suppositories, cannabis suppositories, cannabis lube.
Oh my God, I had no idea. Okay, so I want to talk in a little bit about where to get these and how to source them, safely and reputably and all of that stuff. But that's incredible, because that's a big issue. Just out of my own curiosity, same with men. Does it have similar effects on men, or is this, specific? Yes.
No, they have products for males and females.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That is really, really great. Is there any other areas around kind of stuff that's going on with our bodies that sort of comes to mind for you to share?
Really, yeah. So really what's interesting is there are so many different formulations of cannabinoids. So you can go from a gummy, an edible, chocolate, to a powder that you put in your tea. Then they also have, those Listerine strips that freshen your breath, and they're very thin little strips. Well, you can actually have little thin strips and use it for fast dissolving discrete use. Then they have the smokable form, the traditional smokable form. Then they have bath salts, all right? And then they have the feminine suppositories. So really, I think cannabis has come a long, long way. And finally, they have cannabis lipstick and skincare.
Yeah, I've been hearing a little bit about this beauty CBD sort of, craze. I haven't tried it myself, but I always wonder if it's just like, the added scent to the toothpaste to just make it more palatable or something, what it really does, or the sort of the not the non sort of, God, what's the word I'm trying to come up with? The beauty gummies, those
Yes,
kinds of
yes.
things.
Well, CBD seems to be in everything. At your local cafe, you can have a CBD shot with your coffee. And so it seems like CBD cures
Yep.
everything. But
Yeah.
the biggest take home message is because CBD is such a potent anti-inflammatory, and anti-inflammatory is wonderful for all symptoms and
All
diseases,
things.
right? So if let's talk about skincare. So if you have inflammation like rosacea, a lot of women, as we get older, we actually get cystic acne and skin issues. We might notice fluctuation of hormones. We're getting more acne. You're like, oh my God, I thought I was over this already. Or eczemaceous patches, so eczema patches, dry skin. So the CBD added in skincare, again, an anti-inflammatory. So that's how it works.
So let's get into then the sourcing and the purchasing of these kinds of products and assessing them. Why don't we actually start with some dosing things? So some dosing discussion. So I noticed that I went to what was supposed to be, a reputable site. I'm sure it was. And they had sort of 25, is it milligrams, 25 milligram gummies. They had 50 milligram, CBD capsules, and different dosing. Tell me a little bit about what your take is on dosing and sort of maybe dosing up and understanding efficacy and where we'll start to see effects of the benefits.
Absolutely. So when you're looking for a product, you want to make sure that it's clearly labeled. So if you are looking at dosing, you want to look at the back of the label and look at, what are the components that give you this potency, that give you this dose? Is it CBD? Is it THC? Is it a combination of both? And then you always want to start a small amount. It's like when you buy, new skincare makeup, you just do a little patch test, make sure you're not allergic.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with CBD. You want to just take a little bit. Obviously, you're not going to take it before your 9 a.m. Zoom call, but do it on a weekend where you're not working and you take a small amount. I would say 5 milligrams, right?
Oh,
5
really?
milligrams. Yeah, because you don't know how your body's going to react.
Right.
And you don't know what other ingredients might be in there that you might react to.
Right.
A lot of CBD products have melatonin in it to help relaxation, or valerian root. So maybe you're reacting to the other ingredients as well. Take a small dose and you slowly increase every 3 days until you get your desired effect.
What should the effects of CBD not feel like? Is there something that should be concerning to us?
Yes, this is great. I'm glad you asked this because
Sorry. Gotta go back.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked this because not many people do. So CBD should not make you feel out of control and dizzy. It should not make you feel altered. Some patients do get a little relaxed to a point that they might feel a little sleepy, and that's okay. Those are usually the same patients that get sleepy on magnesium, for example. But you should not feel dizzy or headachy. You should not have an upset stomach or any digestive issues. If you do, it's usually not the CBD, it's the carrier oil or the other ingredients that are within the CBD product.
Okay, great information. Does it sort of kick in a way that we'll notice, or is it usually quite subtle?
Excellent question. So CBD has a cumulative effect. So it is subtle. Day 1 will be very different from day 7, will be very different from day 30. So you might find that if you're using it for, let's say, anxiety relief, the volume starts to get turned down slowly. If you're using it for inflammation, you might notice in a week or two, you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm not as stiff as I normally am, or I'm not as achy. So it takes time.
Okay, that is key. That is quite key because usually we're used to sort of an over-the-counter scenario, like we buy a Tylenol and the Tylenol gets rid of our headache in 20 to 30 minutes. And now you are just saying this is a little bit different. This is something that builds up in your system over time. That's really key because I'm someone who uses like, oh, I'm feeling stressed. I've got a dose of whatever, take the dose of whatever it is. So that's quite key. So let's move on to then sourcing our products. Where should we get them? How should we trust them? Is there some sort of search certification that we're looking for? And also, where do you trust?
So there are many, many different companies all across the United States and online. And every state has its own cannabis and hemp laws. So you're on the West Coast, I'm in New York City. We have totally different laws and regulations. And, our friends in Oklahoma and Texas will have different regulations and different products. So you want to make sure that whatever product you choose, just look at the website. There's transparency. There's third-party testing. Now, what does that mean? That means an outside independent accredited lab has tested the product for heavy metals, solvents, any fungus and bacteria and pesticides. So really the onus is on the consumer and the patient to do their homework and make sure. In many states, they list regulated dispensaries or regulated stores. And I always check the Department of Health website, or I have patients check their DOH website, and there's a list of accredited stores, and they basically attest that the products sold at these stores have been tested.
That's great. And so for things like a kind of moving outside of stuff you might buy at a dispensary, things like skincare, and I'll list a bunch of these in the show notes because I think it's really important to sort of connect people with reputable areas or reputable companies, I should say. What is there? Is there something we should make sure we're looking at? There's very high-end companies like Lord Jones that is making these beautiful, beauty products and gummies and things like that. Is there anything that we should be concerned about when looking at these companies?
Many of those companies are very transparent. If you're looking at a high-end reputable company, they're very transparent. So they'll let you know where they're sourcing their cannabis products and the other ingredients. If it's a sustainable farm, where it's being cultivated, how it's extracted. So are there any solvents that are being used? And they list the ingredients. So is it organic? Is it paraben free? Has it been any animal testing? So I know Sephora does carry skincare products, and Sephora does have a seal, a certain certification before they even carry products. Good. So,
yeah, and I think that's really important because there has been a absolute delusion, in the market of companies that are just throwing them out right and left. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's capitalism, but it's exciting to see. Is there danger to taking it long term?
So there is no proven studies that show that it's danger taken long term.
Got it.
But there are indications that if you take high doses, so in the thousands, really 10 times the recommended amount, they did animal studies and found that it can affect liver enzymes.
Excellent. I love this discussion. We are going to do our research before we publish our show notes with, some real quality companies, as well as the things that sort of surprised me, which was the sexual benefits. And I think that's really exciting. The key takeaway for me, not that I ever usually say this on a podcast, is the idea that it's anti-inflammatory, and understanding that really helps us sort of put it into context of what it can be used for. Now I understand that when my back acts up, which it does because I've had chronic back issues, why the little gel whatever that I have, I'm being very prolific here, right? Or profound, I should say, in what I'm describing it. But the jar of stuff that I have that I put on my back, why it relieves it. And it's because it's inflamed, and I'm just connecting the dots.
Yes, absolutely.
So is there anything else you think is important that we didn't cover, that you think is really important? Or did we kind of sort of do a great job of covering it all?
Actually, I do. As a physician, I tell patients that CBD and cannabis can affect the other medications that you're on. So
that's good.
If you are on antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, or it could be something as simple as a steroid. Maybe you had a flare up and the doctor put you on a dose pack. You want to make sure that you take the medication at least 3 to 4 hours apart from your CBD and cannabis, because it can amplify your prescription medication.
Yeah, that is great. And is this something you think that we should talk to our doctors about before we start on a protocol of some sort, or start using, or is this sort of not yet quite understood by all physicians?
It's tough because not many physicians understand it, and it depends on where you're located. If you're located in California, there's a lot more physicians that understand cannabinoid medicine because it's been legal there for decades. But it's great to keep your doctor in the loop. If they sort of shrug their shoulders, I would say is making sure that you take it 3 to 4 hours apart from your other medication, keep track of your symptoms. And then also the biggest thing is it's not a cure-all, so it's not going to fix everything. Right. So I would just use it as part of the puzzle.
It's more of a treatment than a cure, right?
Exactly.
Got it. So last question is, what is one piece of advice that you would offer your younger self?
Oh, my goodness. I love that question.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is sometimes you really need to unlearn what you've learned. Because here I was going through traditional medical school, and I was in so much pain, and I had so many doctors in front of me access, and no one could help me with my chronic spinal pain. And it was this one physician who had an open mind about cannabis medicine in San Francisco. He was an HIV and AIDS doctor, and he said, this plant is an anti-inflammatory, so it gets to the root cause of your problem. And for me, growing up in a very traditional Asian household, cannabis.
Yeah, that wasn't a topic of dinner conversation.
Exactly. But I learned so much stigma about cannabis, and it was very hard for me to pull that aside and just look at it from a very scientific perspective. And until I did that is when I started realizing the benefits of plant medicine.
That's great. And I think also, as you were talking, I was thinking just the benefits of being open-minded to something you may have had, influence over, or something that had influence over you that you really thought was sort of a negative thing, sort of understanding the benefits. So that's great advice. So how can people find you, and how do people work with you?
Absolutely. They can find me on my website, which is drjunechin.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and all my contact information is there.
Great. Well, we will make sure to include those in the notes. I can't thank you enough. I think this is a really important conversation. One of the areas that I feel very strongly about is sort of understanding. I don't even know if these are called alternative treatments, but looking at things that are solutions out there that we may not know exist. So I think a lot of us know CBD at this point, but sort of understanding what it's being used for. And I can't thank you enough for sort of clearing that up for us and opening this conversation. So, can't wait to have you back soon.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you.